Hey guys, today iRacing dropped a load of new content, and one of the things that they gave us was the new Radical SR10. Now the SR8's been a super popular car for a long time, and I've raced in that series for quite a while. So in this video, I'm going to try and show you the differences and give you a review of the new car on a track I'm very familiar with because we were using it all of last week. So the way I'm going to do this is go and drive 10 laps in both cars. I'm going to get familiar with them, get comfortable with them, and I'm not going to show you that in this video obviously because that would be very, very boring. I'm then going to do a 5-lap run in each and record the data along with the lap times. And I'm going to give you my subjective feedback on how the two cars differ, and I'll give you my honest opinion on whether I like the new car and whether it's going to be good as a race series for you in the new iRacing season. So let's go. So we're going to start off with the fastest lap I did in the SR8. So I conducted 5 laps, these are the lap times, and in both cars it was the final lap that was the quickest, kind of as you'd expect in these cars. So in the SR8, across the start line, the first thing you notice is the engine note is great, and every input I make with the steering, the car just responds to immediately, so the car feels really balanced. We're using the Brands Hatch default iRacing setup here. And I've done a lot of laps in this car over the last week. This is where the championship was in the final week of this season. And you can see basically the car is doing what I'm telling it to. There's no snap from the rear. I'm able to be progressive on the brakes and just get the nose into the apexes and pick up the throttle early. And the steering movements are generally pretty smooth because I'm not having to correct any slides. Nothing's really going that wrong. On the straights, the car feels fast, but it also manages to really carry that speed through the high-speed corners like this right-hander just here. You can use the curbs and the car's stable, and in fact if you look through this next corner we use a lot of curb and it's even really stable over the bumps on the exit. So as you can probably tell from my tone here, I'm really positive about the way the SR8 feels. I'm really in tune with it, I like it. This is exactly how I really want the SR10 to feel when I drive it in a moment, and if we can get pretty much close to this, I'll be happy. So key takeaways: positive, responsive front end, excellent engine note, and the car feels lightweight and powerful at the same time. So that's our fastest lap, 1:16.631. Now let's see how the SR10 stacks up by comparison. So straight away, I haven't changed the volume here, but this car is a lot quieter. So with the turbocharged engine, it's obviously muffling that sound a bit. And it's the same in the car, although I hope you'll agree it looks really cool. The car's very aggressive from the outside, so aesthetically, really good. Now we're using the medium downforce setup here. I tried a few different setups, and this is the one that felt the quickest, felt the nicest around here, but still one of the default iRacing setups. And my first impressions, having driven the car now for quite a number of laps, and hopefully you'll agree from watching the images, is that it's a lot more snappy. It doesn't tend to do exactly what my hands are telling it. It doesn't tend to go where the steering wheel's pointed without a bit more coaxing than the SR8. Now some of that's obviously going to be set up, but the car does feel to be inherently understeery, and then once the front end eventually bites, the rear snaps. Now I'm not 100% sure why that is, and it does get a lot better as the tyres warm up, but look at how many extra stabs at the corner I'm having to have with this car to get the nose in. I'm having to really slow it down more, and then even through that corner there we ran wider despite a lower apex speed. I'm trying to drive it in a similar way, but it's not as easy for sure. And what you're going to see from the lap time is it's also not as fast. Again with the caveat that with a specific Brands Hatch setup, maybe we could find that extra time. It's certainly not much faster like I was expecting. Lots of horsepower, a much more modern car. I was expecting it to be quite a bit quicker than the SR8. But subjectively, much more difficult to drive, and on first impressions, not as fast either. So now we're going to compare both cars side by side and see if we can spot where those differences really lie. So the good thing about having these two different engine notes is you really can hear when each car's on the throttle and tell them apart. So up into Druids, not a lot in it at the moment, both cars looking pretty similar. So through turn 1 and turn 2, not a lot, but it's by Graham Hill Bend here that the SR8 starts to pull away, and that's because there's just a bit less understeer. When you look closely at the steering inputs, the car on the right is having to use a lot more steering to get the same amount of turn out of the car. So at this point the SR8 has pulled ahead a bit. We're going to just pause and resync the cars at the bridge here. That's the gap. But now they're back together so you can directly compare once again. Through the high-speed corner here, steering wheel on the right looks like it's maybe doing slightly more work, but there's not a lot in it. This is where you really notice the difference. Big understeer from the SR10 through that fast right-hander. And that saps your confidence going into the next right-hander as well. You just can't commit with quite as much speed. You can see that the car runs out towards the grass. Now bear in mind, both of these cars are on the 5th lap of their stint, so tyre temperature should be pretty equal. As we get to the final corner here, clearways, once again it's the SR8 that's pulled just ahead, maybe around about another half a second since the bridge. So at the line, it's 1 second separating them on this setup. Okay, so final impressions comparing both cars this evening. I managed to do quite a lot of laps, and I have to say I prefer the SR8. I know it's easy to say that about something that you're used to, but here's the real reason. The SR8 feels raw. It feels like the throttle response is crisp and immediate. It feels like the car is on edge. It's on the edge of that balance between understeer and oversteer all the time. And just a small tweak with the steering or with your right foot, and you can just change the balance and change the attitude of the car. The SR10, it definitely felt a bit muted. The turbocharged element obviously takes away some of the volume of the car, but in terms of the crispness of the throttle response, it's muted in that area as well. The inherent understeer I hope can get dialed out with setups, but it really just felt snappy, especially when the tyres were cold. The SR8 tyres do start off cold, and that's something that we're all used to, but it felt different with the SR10. It felt snappy, it felt unnatural. So I don't want to come away from this with a negative first impression. The lap times are pretty similar, and in fact I don't really care what the lap time difference is, but it is more that the car is more difficult to drive and a little bit less rewarding. So that's my honest opinion of the SR10. Hopefully with fixed setups and improved development over the coming weeks, it will turn into something really great. But for the time being, for me, I'd be sticking with the SR8.